Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today our guest is Sarah Francis. I'm very happy to have you here today, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you as well for joining. Can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience before we get into the topic?
Of course, my name's Sarah Francis. I work with a company called Polymath Consulting. We support the payments community with advice on all kinds of payments, really. My specialism sits with the best practice for AML, KYC, fraud prevention, really helping people to maximize the traffic through their business whilst minimizing the risk that represents.
Yeah, super nice. They all seem to be very interesting fields or very interesting topics. And but of course we have 10 minutes today. So which topic would you like to get into today?
I think really it's about understanding the balance needed of the good and the bad when looking at risk in fraud prevention and AML monitoring. I know we've talked about it before, but I have something of a hobby horse, as it were, around this, because often I think as fraud prevention and risk specialists, we tend to be looking for the dark side of life most of the time, what represents bad behavior. And that's quite limiting because very bad behavior does have a certain balance or pattern to it, but then so does good behavior. And the good behavior amongst clients really depends on the type of service you're offering. So, for instance, if you've got a particular type of company, let's take it to the extreme. Let's assume that your customer base only consists of super rich people flying all over the world and spending lots of money here, there, and everywhere. Now, that creates a certain pattern of behavior. And as super rich people, they have a certain behavior for that. Now, those transactional patterns could well mirror what would be considered bad behavior, i.e. lots of cross-border spends, lots of large amounts, and things like that. So it's really how well do you understand your customer base to decide what you expect of them, what motivates them to use your product or service, and what behavior does that create. That gives you, if you like, your baseline understanding of your customer base so that you can compare what you consider bad behavior against that and make sure you're not creating an environment where you're forcing your good customers to behave in a slightly unusual way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Almost making them look like bad customers just to transact with you. And I think it seems like such a common sense thing to consider. But the reality of it is most of us don't necessarily consider this. We are just very, very focused on what the bad guys are doing, what behavior we should stop. We rarely take a step back and a deep breath and say, well, hold on a minute. Is there a legitimate or real reason for that behavior? Is that behavior actually what we should expect from our customers? I always start this and advise clients to start with this with just a basic Venn diagram. You've got your two circles. On the one hand, you've got the people who would want to use your service. They have a reason, a behavioral approach, as it were, a motivation for using that service. And that creates this kind of behavior. And on the other hand, you've got the guys whose motivation is really to take money out of other people's accounts, commit fraud, or hide the proceeds of crime. And that represents this behavior. Now, what you've got sitting in between is a little crossover point. And what that means for your systems and your resources is this behavior sits acceptable within your systems. This behavior gets stopped That little bit in the middle is the expensive part, because that's where resources get involved. That's where people need to get to know and understand individual customers on a better basis to decide whether they sit on this side or this side. And really what we recommend is a constant review for this. Because if you think about it, what was probably good behavior or good motivation pre-COVID has changed considerably. And if you don't keep up with reviewing both sides of this equation, then what happens is it becomes outmoded, and the bad guys get away with more and the good guys get restricted more.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what everybody's looking for is more transactions to make companies more successful, but also greater customer care. I mean, customer focus is the key both in risk and in commercial success. And I think it's something that's often hidden. And if you get the equation right, it has a considerable commercial benefit, because if you create the right kind of profile and understanding, you can work as a risk community with your marketing department to show them what customers they want to target. Create your marketing to target those customers who sit on this side, on the good side. And often that is something that is missed, and it can make for so much more success and comfort in the company. You know, we often as compliance and risk get labelled as business prevention. And the reality of it is, if we work well together with marketing, if we truly understand our customers, we're about business promotion, not necessarily prevention. And I think that's a very important point for compliance and commercially successful companies, of having that key communication and acceptance that the risk department can do so much to drive more commercially successful transactions.
Yeah.
And it's something that works, always sounds so simple. And so often I get clients saying, yeah, but that just makes sense. And then they sit back and say, oh, hold on a minute, that does make sense. And all of a sudden, marketing and compliance become friends.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting look at it as well. And what I hear is it's a lot about the right balance and getting like a right understanding when it comes to this, you know, customer behaviors, and recognizing what is good, what is bad, and the gray area essentially between it. And
absolutely,
yeah. And maybe like what then, I hear that your clients also find this making sense. What maybe are some things our audiences that are in this field can do also to start implementing, you know, like the early steps they can do to get into this kind of track?
I think the most basic part is to understand your customer. We talk about KYC, know your customer, but it's that step beyond knowing and documentation. It's understanding what is their motivation for using your product. If you take a look at your product and service, why should people use it? What is their reason? What makes them want to use this product for payments over other products? And if you get that, then you understand why and how they're using it. So it might be that your product is used because it's pocket money for teenagers. That's a base concept, which creates a certain behavior. It might be that your product is for money remittance or migrant workers sending money home. That promotes a certain behavior and channel of payments and amount of payments. For instance, if you look at the average working salary within the country of origin, that gives you a base understanding of how much money would likely to be or could likely to be going abroad. So any larger amounts than that might prompt enhanced due diligence or looking to understand. But having that base concept of this is why the product's in use, this is why they're using it, gives you that base understanding of how much money's involved and what they're likely to be spending on it and how and why. And that in turn allows you to separate that good and bad piece. So understand your product, understand why customers would want to use it, and understand that base behavior point.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a really good summary of all this as well. Since we are running kind of short on time, I have only like one more question remaining, and this is essentially how it is for you to be part of risk community in general. Like, because of course I hear you be part of risk and then fraud prevention and everything.
I think it's endlessly fascinating. It's never the same. I am fond of saying there's no real experts in this community. There's just those that've got a little bit more experience than others. And I say that because expertise suggests that you have control or know everything. And there's always so much to be learned. So it's a challenging, constantly varying environment. And that certainly makes for an interesting life.
Yeah, super nice look out at it as well. So yeah, that's basically it for our time for today. Unfortunately, I wish we could of course chat more. But I thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and this topic for our audience.
Thank you. Good to talk to you.
You as well. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.